Are you the quantum mechanics?
Yes, we are the Quantum Mechanics. We're the paranormal podcast for the believers, the doubters, and everyone in between. Last time we recorded, we didn't realise, but we also had that heavy Kelpie rain again. So I wonder if we're going to get that this afternoon when we're recording.
We sort of bring it upon ourselves somehow. Maybe the way, because we've now got a new way of recording, and we sort of get into our seats. You sort of liken it to like a pilot.
Yes.
I wonder whether we have inadvertently learned how to do some kind of rain dance.
Oh, I see. Yeah,
by the movement of getting down and
getting in, because once we're in here, it's pretty hard to get out, which could be a problem because the dog's with us at the moment, so he may want to pour out. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. He's looking pretty chilled at the moment.
What an image of two stiff middle-aged men.
yeah, with the dog. And we have just had a lovely lunch, haven't we?
That was pretty darned good. Because we recorded 2 today because you're going on your holidays.
Yeah.
And I'm around about the place. And yes, I took you to a place that I went the other day for a lovely burger. And
it was amazing.
Do
you think if we mention them, they'll just give us free burgers from now on?
If you listen to us and you work at the Crazy Bear Farm Shop in Stadhampton.
Yeah, please remember us. Remember our voices. Remember these voices and the praise of your burgers.
And just good God, let us have more of them.
It was quite weird because I don't know exactly what Ben's going to cover today, but he did give me a bit of a hint that it was to do with paranormal food. So I hope there was no kind of nefarious reason that you took me out for a burger.
Fairy. That is what we talk about. It's not just fairies. You know, I think of all the paranormal topics, fairies and I would say fairies and werewolves is what I famously love.
That's your favourite bits.
I do love fairies a lot. I love fairies. And we have spoken a little bit before about fairy feasts, but I wanted to expand that because I love the idea of sort of paranormal and unusual food. And so I suppose that's a great segue of just getting into it. So, because it isn't just fairies that present humans with food, but I do think the fairy stories are amongst the, I guess, the most intriguing. So we know
you got a few of those.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
We know that fairy foodstuffs are mysterious. Eating or drinking within fairyland is widely accepted to be a way of ensuring that you cannot escape back to your home, and you take the fairy nature within yourself, and therefore you must abstain meals from visiting. I'm taking this from, this is a brilliant website, British Fairies.
When you say abstain meals from visiting, what does that mean?
Abstain from meals whilst visiting. So if you do visit
you can't
the fairies,
eat when you're there.
You mustn't eat or drink.
No matter how much they tempt you.
No matter how much they tempt you.
Got it.
And here are a few little tales that I found. In the Hertfordshire fairy tale of the Green Lady, a girl working as a servant for the Green, so she's a fairy woman, green woman,
right,
is warned by some fish in a well where she draws the water not to eat the household's food. It sounds a little unlikely, doesn't it? But that is essentially that is what she was told.
I wish those fish should stop carping on. Sorry, couldn't resist.
But you see, she did refuse the food. But what is odd is that the converse of this rule can be true. If you encounter fairy food and drink in the human world, refusing to eat it is the perilous thing. So there are numerous examples of the potential fatal consequences of what not accepting fairy hospitality is in this world. The ill effects may indeed be more to do with the offence taken by the not eating rather than what you're offered. So
that's a bit of a paradox.
It is, and so you're never quite sure which way to go. So you either offend the fairies and
not eating,
and they might do something terrible to you, or you eat them and you're glamorized. That's the favourite word I've learnt from doing this. You remember glamour being put under the spell of the fairies. Things are not what they appear. They are glamorized.
Right.
On the Isle of Arran, 2 men were ploughing some fresh land, and one joked that the fairies should feed them in recognition of their hard labour. They duly found a table laid at the head of the field, but neither dared eat what had been provided because the field had never produced any crops as yet.
Can I just go back to their motivations? So they're ploughing a field, I guess, for themselves or to do jobs. Why would the fairies?
Yes, I know that's very much the point. But I suppose what they're thinking is the fairies will benefit from this tilling of the land,
right?
And for some reason, maybe the fairies could plant their crops. Turns out, though, that field never produced any crops because of their refusal to eat the food. The fairies were so upset.
I don't blame the fairy in that sense. They're going along, these two humans ploughing the field going, oh, we've done such a good job, the fairies should reward us with some lovely food. They go, oh, fair enough, and they set up a table.
I know.
Do you know what I mean? With some really good grub on it, and then the two guys go, oh, I'm not eating that. I'd be offended if I was a fairy.
The thing is, as well, though, that it's not recorded in that tale how big the food is.
Right.
Because, I mean, they're small, aren't they?
Oh, I see. So, yeah, it might be a small spread, as they say.
It could be a very small spread. But what do you know, I'm intrigued by the tales of what people do to you personally if you don't take the food or the drink.
Right.
What do you the worst thing would be like killing you, wouldn't it? That'd be the worst thing.
Or kind of, eternal torture or something.
Yeah. Well, take this story of the Devon ploughman who very kindly mended a fairy's broken baking peel. Don't know what one of those is.
I was going to say, what's a baking
I don't know. But the fairy... He mended it, and some cider was left in thanks, which the man happily drank. The ploughboy, however, refused it, and he was pinched mercilessly, is how it was recorded.
And I would imagine fairies have got pretty small fingers, so
yes.
It probably wouldn't hurt that much.
I love that. Oh, I'm going to come for you. You know how, like when you go chasing, like this sounds, when you're playing with small children, you go like little crab pinches. I'm going to come and get you. I imagine that's the fairies, but it's like, it's not a terrible thing to happen. But also,
I love that. We could do a whole episode on paranormal pinches.
Oh, do you know what? I reckon I could.
You could muster something up?
Yeah, I think so. In comparison, in one Scottish account, a ploughman felt thirsty and, hearing a butter churn, wished out loud for a drink from it. A woman in green appeared and offered him some fresh buttermilk. He refused this because her clothing made him suspect her supernatural nature. She told him that, after a year had passed, he'd not be needing a drink at all, and, sure enough, within 12 months, he was dead. So that's the worst thing that can happen.
Again, it's another story of... I guess it's a cautionary careful what you wish for. You wish for it, you get it, and then you go, I don't want it now.
Yeah, I know.
So what's going on? Take the risk.
I love the very vague geographical references in this because that last one was from Scotland. A similar fate befell a man from the Isle of Man, just generally from the Isle of Man,
right, who
refused to eat smoked meal porridge offered by the fairies, and he died as well. But he was given a countdown to that death.
Really?
Well, he was told that if he didn't take the porridge, he would die.
Right.
And
had he asked for the porridge, or do we not know?
He was rewarded with some porridge.
Right. Okay.
And it's not much of a reward, is it?
Those fairies must go, what are wrong with these bloody humans? They wish for these things, we give them, and then they just, I don't want it. Outrageous. No wonder I'm with the fairies on this one, I think.
The trouble with fairy food, and we have discussed this before, and goes somewhere. The trouble with fairy food is that it isn't what it appears. That's the big problem with it.
It's glamoured.
So a man from Dornoch in Sutherland was taken by the fairies, and they made him fly with them. I don't know, but apparently he thought that this was a terrible ordeal. And to calm him down, they gave him beef, bread and fish. But he complained afterwards, when he'd sort of come around from the spell, that it was all cork. It was completely made of cork. A Perthshire woman who was abducted by fairies said that the food she was offered looked very tempting. But again, when the glamour came away from her eyes, it was only refuse of the earth. It was plants, it was dried leaves,
Right,
that
mud.
sort of thing. Yeah. And unfortunately, a Scottish abductee. So this is interesting. So she was presented with a huge table, sumptuous foods, and she describes there's a whole ham. And this is the weird thing. They appear to be, in this case, humans, not human size, but the size you would expect for a human.
Yeah.
So you've got a big glazed ham, you've got puddings, you've got pies. It's almost like a Victorian feast. You've got milk in fish, all of that sort of stuff.
Sounds a bit like those scenes in Harry Potter, isn't it?
It is, yes, in the dining hall. It's like Ron's eyes.
Yeah, whatever they fancy just appears.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And she was so grateful. She was going to dive in, but she said grace. The grace removed the spell, and the whole table was horse dung.
All right. Well, I know when we started this, I was kind of on the fairies side, but do you think this is a result of the previous people who turned down the food, and this is almost like revenge, or was it always horse dung for everyone?
Well, fairy food is always delicious until it's not.
Right.
And
I'm just imagining a fairy restaurant with one of those hygiene ratings on the side. You know what I mean? 2 stars, mainly due to the dung.
two heaps.
Yeah.
So those are kind of folklore stories. You can tell because there isn't any sort of very specific reference to who they are. It's just like, it's just like, a man from Birmingham once sneezed and saw a
Also,
fairy.
the size variation.
Yeah.
I guess you could argue that's all the glamour going on, but
But I wanted to get deeper into the whole food thing, and I discovered a wonderful source. It's called a Trojan Feast. Yes, sorry, I didn't mean
like
to
a Bearnaise.
The Food and Drink Offerings of Aliens, Fairies and Sasquatch by Joshua Cutchin.
Oh, that's a niche book, isn't it?
It's such a niche book, but my God, I
That's
admire
brilliant.
him for the 280 pages.
That's brilliant.
So the first thing that really struck me was because I thought these this belief in the fairy food was very much indigenous to sort of UK and perhaps Irish culture, or perhaps Irish culture and therefore UK culture.
Yeah.
But he points out these beliefs are also reflected in the views of North American tribes. There's one called the Haida, and also the Cherokee, the Pawnee, and all things unpronounceable, the Tsimshian, I think that's pronounced.
Right.
And they speak of a creature called the buckwuss, or the woodman, who entices passers-by to share the feast. Anyone foolish enough to do so is trapped in the spirit world, and they become themselves a buckwuss.
It's a good name, isn't it? A bookwuss.
Yeah, very, very much so, very much.
Any description of what kind of food's on offer here?
No, it is described as he puts it, a feast. So it is a tempting dish.
Temptation is coming up in my mind quite a lot as you're talking. It's very that's the cautionary tale, isn't it? Gluttony, temptation, resisting your urges to binge at a feast. It's that seems to be the theme.
It is, because if you binge at a feast, it is all. It's like you're sort of. It's almost like personal avarice, basically. Yeah. Well, this might get clearer because it isn't just fairies and bookwusses. It's also aliens.
Right.
Consider the case of Ivan Martinovich. I did that in one go. I can't believe I did that.
Very good. Don't draw attention to it when we get them right.
He told his local newspaper that a tall stranger with grey skin and clear blue eyes took him aboard an extraterrestrial craft in September 1990. Martinovich's entry into the ship was sudden and imperceptible. He was shown a quick view of his life on a sort of screen. Isn't that weird? That's almost like a near-death experience. After which the beings invited him to their homeworld. And he enthusiastically agreed.
You would, wouldn't you?
But this is where I would be disappointed. Once there, he marvelled at the aliens' diet of milk and vegetables. Milk and vegetables? That's disappointing.
This is what you do with them.
Carrots in a white sauce.
Yeah.
He asked to try some, but it was forbidden by the extraterrestrials, who told him that eating their food would influence him, and he would be forced to stay on their world. Following a series of warnings about mankind's destructive behaviour, God, we hear that again and again, don't we?
Yeah.
He was returned home the same night, having not consumed a single thing.
Not even a veggie kebab.
No, not at all.
I'll tell you what, it's interesting while you're saying it, because I guess it might be an alien cultural thing, but we've got such an association with food and drink as a way of, reaching out to people, of bonding, of being hospitable, of, breaking bread, let's say. But I don't think I've ever heard a alien story that's involved alien food before this one.
I've got a cracker coming up.
Have you? Oh.
And I want you to keep in mind this idea of, I think you're getting close to what the theory is around this familiarity, right? Because food is very familiar to us. And particularly, why on earth would you go to an alien world and be given vegetables and milk?
Yeah.
I mean, milk unless we all have a very similar way of evolving on different planets.
Yeah.
The idea of drinking the milk of another mammal on this planet, it's a bit weird when you think about it. It's not weird. Obviously, it's not weird, but when you really think about it and go, yeah, I can understand why an alien might go, you do what with what?
But are they saying were they saying it was cow's milk, or were they going into detail? With the
just
vegetables?
Milk and vegetables.
No detail.
Well, no, although there is, he quotes in a later paragraph that I think he used the phrase something like disappointingly terrestrial.
Right.
I think they've got like some radishes and a few carrots. It's not.
Maybe this is why they keep taking the cows.
For burgers.
No, I meant for the milk.
Oh, I see what you mean.
So bear with me on this. The first time they visited Earth, somehow they tasted some milk and they were like, oh my God, this is amazing.
Oh, I'm with you.
Next time you go to Earth, pick us up a cow.
Actually, I've heard crazier ideas.
Yeah.
I've heard crazier ideas.
Yeah.
And I've just got to say, every time I think milk, I'm just like wondering whether they do chocolate milk, because my favourite thing in the world is chocolate milk.
Right.
Anyway, but what he does, he points out in the book that what his tale is such a weird combination of alien folklore and also the life review of what we hear from people who have had a death experience. That he sort of says, look, so either, and we've said this many times before, either the teller of this story is a liar or he's a fan of folklore, and not just English folklore or Irish folklore, but he points out world.
All right, Bear.
He points out
They're not
world.
coming for you. They only like the cows. Sorry, that was the dog, as you could probably guess. Sorry.
I hope he didn't see a fairy.
Yeah.
Because he has a story that I won't relay the whole thing because it's very, very similar. But there is a story of a lost girl that happens in America, and she gets the life review. She gets offered some food. When she eats the food, she stays for a bit, and then she's given another piece of what turned out to be human food, which releases the spell, and she's back. But there's some very key similarities between what she tells about Martinovich and what she tells about the girl. I've said that name 3 times. I'm very proud of myself.
But that also sounds a bit glamoury as well.
It's incredibly glamorous.
Because you're taken out of the spell by eating your normal human food. That whole life regression, your life flashing before your eyes is really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, and
it's got, because what you're talking about has connotations to do with near-death experiences and with, like you said, fairy and other folklore. It's odd.
It is odd, and of course, what we heard there is that you put a Christian message in there, and everything's broken again. So it's like there needs to be a distraction to take you away from your normal line of thinking. You know, but it's probably part of this, magic, either with a C or a K, that is bringing you into this world. But here's the thing, it isn't, I mean, we're going to come back to aliens because they're the best ones here, but it's Bigfoot. He says this is the most famous testimony. I never heard it before, and it's a cracker. And it's from a chap called Albert Ostman, who swore in a 1957 affidavit that he was abducted by a Sasquatch 33 years earlier. Ottman worked as a prospector in British Columbia and was allegedly picked up and carried while asleep, sleeping bag and all. After 3 hours, he was unceremoniously dropped in a small valley surrounded by 4 Sasquatch that he presumed were father, mother, son and daughter. Over the course of a few days, he was fed sweet roots that he described had a satisfying taste. So interestingly enough, Ostman used consumables and also the things that he had on him to escape, things that are sort of different to the world that he was in. So he tricked the father into eating his entire can of snuff, the tobacco making the beast ill. And he then...
Not surprisingly.
He also convinced the largest of the Sasquatch to down his entire flask of coffee. And he said, euphemistically, that did no good. I can imagine.
I just got this vision of these 2 Sasquatches going absolutely nuts. One high as a kite on snuff. The other one had so much coffee, it's running around like crazy. Yeah. I'll tell you what,
I'm not sure he was running around. I think he meant a different thing.
Oh, I see.
The first coffee and cigarette of the day.
Right.
I think he might need to go and use the leaves, as they say in Sasquatch.
If a Sasquatch poos in the wood,
does it still exist?
Does anybody hear? When you were saying this story, what was going through my mind? I was thinking about Goldilocks and the 3 Bears.
Yes, too hot, too cold, just
the
right.
The family, eating the porridge, who's been sleeping in my bed. There's certainly parallels with Goldie. Is that just me?
No, I don't think it is. I think that's interesting, and that sort of brings me on to some of the symbolism that is going on here.
Because if you just substituted bears with Sasquatch.
Well, yes, that's right. But of course, it's very interesting what you say, because in Goldilocks and the 3 Bears, the bears are out, right, when Goldilocks is there. Yeah. But they appear only when she's sated and in bed, which, there is an allegory there of...
Oh, like a dream state. Or, Yeah.
Which, they're interesting, not in my notes at all, but
that's
very...
really interesting. Because
she is sort of... She's consuming and then using the facilities. You know what I mean? This toilet is too tall for me.
2-star review on TripAdvisor.
This toilet is just a urinal. Yes. Anyway,
the other thing that was going through my head, a bit of Alice in Wonderland was going through my head while we were talking about this. That connection,
which is we've had that come up recently. And the other thing is, how bad was that Sasquatch food? You know what I mean? I've always heard they do a good prawn cocktail, Sasquatch. You've always heard?
Yeah. That's what the rumours are.
Sasquatch dining.
Their Mary Rose sauce is just to die for.
Oh, I got to say, I went for somewhere for lunch yesterday. I'm not super rich. We didn't have any food in the house. I went and got a jacket potato with prawns and Mary Rose sauce. I love it. That's my favourite.
I love a prawn cocktail. I know it's a bit tacky these days, but I do love a traditional prawn cocktail.
I love it. But the thing is, it's school holidays, right? And it's sixth form was working in shops. What she actually gave me was prawns, and then she dolloped a load of mayonnaise over it. And I said, that's not Mary Rose sauce. And she looked at me like I just told her that she'd got very poor A-level results. And
you could have just added a bit of ketchup and made your own. Not quite the same.
£6 for a jacket potato, man.
What?
Yeah, £6.
You were glamoured.
I was absolutely glad. I ate it very grumpily.
Yeah, I bet.
But so the symbolism, I think, is important. Because the author points out that quite a lot of the time, even putting the Sasquatches aside, a lot of the time the food that is offered is bread or bread-like.
Comes back to breaking bread.
It is. And bread has long been associated with fertility and rebirth.
Yeah.
Wheat dies and is reborn time and time again, and has been tied to themes of renewal since ancient Egypt.
Well, even, the body of Christ is bread, isn't it?
Exactly right. So, stop reading my notes.
I'm sorry.
For millennia, bakers in countless cultures have fashioned bread in the shape of moons, suns, genitalia, representing reproduction and rebirth.
Right.
And this duality is well represented in the Christian Bible. The Old Testament associates bread with the fertility of the earth, mentioning it more than 20 times, while the New Testament, over 30 references, embraces bread as a central focal point of the Eucharist, offering eternal life. Bread symbolises the cyclical nature of existence in all its many forms. So, what does that mean?
Can I have a guess?
Yeah.
This, maybe I'm wrong, but this seems to be leading towards this is almost some... I hesitate to use the word kind of mass hysteria, but it's almost like some human need that is being played out with these food encounters with either spirits or fairies or Sasquatch or aliens, that which kind of maybe leans to it not being real.
Yes, and perhaps familiar. Right. So
okay, all right. Yeah.
So this is where he starts to put this theory together.
Right.
Are we maybe dealing with intelligences at the boundaries of the internal and external, the physical and the non-physical? Entities so intelligent and foreign to us that they can only effectively communicate to us through symbolism and mythology.
Right.
So he uses, like you talk about the ants sometimes looking at the moon.
Yeah.
He says, certainly the family dog must consider the bulk of its owner's behaviour illogical and magical. Except, well, a few things, but the feeding time, right?
Right.
That is something...
It's a bond.
It's a bond. We all understand the feeding time.
Yeah.
There isn't a single dog that doesn't look at its owners at dinner time and go, I want some of that, or remind you it's 5 o'clock and it's time for its dinner.
Yeah.
So he then goes on to say, and I think this is probably where we would go, modern science would write off such a notion as highly unlikely. It's fantastic, right? In the sort of truest sense of the word. The easiest course of action is for us to fold and admit the phenomena is wholly psychological.
Which I just did, didn't I? I did fold. I folded about halfway through, but I like your ants analogy, and the dog analogy is really interesting because it's like, yeah, that would make sense. But again, I guess what's going through my mind is in alien encounters, let's talk about that. I'm surprised food doesn't come into it more often then.
Stay tuned for the best alien food for you'll ever hear.
You're really...
So food does come. I'll just finish that sentence because that just sort of closes that thought. If you examine the data, he points out it is difficult to conclude it's highly psychological because the number of these cases involving multiple witnesses and the strong consistency of these phenomena across the world, he suggests something else is at play. So just before I say what that is, I wanted to say, like, in the extraterrestrial thing, quite often you do get this thing where people are forced to drink something horrible.
Right.
And they're always told, like, oh, you need this for your own safety. You need this to perhaps fly in the craft. And that, I think, it associates with the medical persona that is quite often put forward by the aliens. It's not, you don't, when you see fairies, there's the most common example outside of like the farming examples and the interchange of presents and things like that is there is a fairy feast. The fairies are always having a feast.
Yeah.
There's singing, there's dancing, there's merriment, there's laughter. It's a joyful place, and therefore it's obvious that you would find a huge cooked ham. It'd be very odd to go onto an alien spacecraft and see a huge cooked ham.
But so I guess that ties into the thing of making you feel comfortable and familiar, and reaching out to you, and just making you. So let's go with it. Let's say you are on an alien spaceship. Not the horrible food, but giving you nice food would calm you, wouldn't it? And I'm thinking maybe this is where the book is leading. I've got a feeling this is going to end up. These are not separate things. The fairy one's not separate from the Sasquatch. It's not separate from the aliens. It's maybe our interpretation of it. Are they all the same entity, being from another dimension, whatever?
Stop reading my notes.
I'm sorry. It's because you're telling the story so well. You're leading me.
Extraterrestrial, spiritual, or interdimensional intelligences which exist in other realms can interact with human beings by, for example, altering chemical compounds in the brain,
right,
which we spoke about the other week.
Yep.
DMT.
Yep.
Leading to altered states of consciousness.
Alice in Wonderland all over again.
In order to facilitate these changes in neural chemistry, these entities often need to draw upon the human race's rich symbolism of food and drink, offering food mirages which elicit a change in consciousness in the observer. These simulacra are directly projected into the mind and become an extension of the entity itself. So he uses the phrase eating the god. This is a phrase that comes up in sort of shamanism and other religions, and you can attribute it to the Eucharist as well, right? This is the body of Christ.
I'm also thinking you could also look at it a different way. Let's go with it. Let's go with these entities. Let's call them from another dimension. Could it be in our kind of ant staring at the moon way? It's so much for us to comprehend that we have to create these almost hallucinations of something that's familiar and calming to us, like food or comforting. Do you know what I mean? Food's a comfort as well.
Exactly. So this theatre of the entity food is perhaps a way to ease the shock of encountering the unknown. And he has another interesting way of describing that. So when we take measures to make animals at home in a zoo, when we get the lions in, we don't just put them in a box. We try and recreate the savannah. We try and recreate the watering holes and the earth pits, and we feed them the way that they don't go chasing wildebeest, but their food is thrown off a truck. It's not handed to them by a person. And it's in its raw state. That is what is normal to them, and it eases the shock of them being in an environment where they're being stared at by humans. It's like it makes them feel okay. And this is the theatre of this food. But I think the interesting thing here is it's not the food isn't being presented by the entity, and the entity isn't asking us to eat the food just to make us feel comfortable. It is the encounter. The food is very much part of the cause and the effect of the encounter.
Yeah, almost, because we talked about drugs the other week. It's almost part of the trip, let's say.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, the way of... But again, if that makes sense, it's reminding me of that scene in Contact, the movie, where Jodie Foster ends up talking to the alien, and it takes the form of her father. And why my father? Well, it's not your father. We just thought this image might be more acceptable to you and make you feel calmer.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, and there are alien encounters, or I would say non-human encounters, where something pretends to be another relative. Yeah, so they pretend to be the grandmother or something, but they're just off. There's an uncanny valley about it, and they're off.
Yeah.
which is like this, right?
Well, it makes sense in a way, doesn't it? Because I was just thinking, you know, even the grey aliens, okay, they're not perfectly human, but they are kind of humanoid looking. Easier to accept that than, say, some creature with a giant head that looks like a hornet.
Right. Or something that is, I liked his words, they're on the line between physical and non-physical.
Right.
And perhaps we simply couldn't see them if they didn't find a way to connect with us at the human level.
Right. So they're not as, I think it was Star Trek or someone described it, humans as big bags of water.
Right.
They're not big bags of water.
Would the ants really see us if we didn't do something? So they see us perhaps if we put some food down.
Yeah.
They might even see us if we step on them. If we just go around walking on our day.
Yeah, well, they ignore us, or they can't comprehend us yet.
No, exactly. He does make this really interesting point, though, about, because the other day we were talking about like whether the archetypes live in our head or not.
Yeah.
And this relationship between food and paranormal entities. And it hadn't really occurred to me that he says lots and lots of paranormal entities sell us food every day. So Rice Krispies and Lucky Charms is fairies. Right. The mermaid on the Starbucks, and this is American, so there's lots that don't make sense. But the Jolly Green Giant for vegetables.
What's that got to do with sweet corn?
He was just very good at growing it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of dung off a Jolly Green Giant.
Yeah.
But I saved my favourite alien
here we go.
food encounter. This is just... I read about this about 3 years ago, and I think one of the reasons I want to do this episode is just so I can contain this story. There's lots of reasonable accounts of this story, but this was the one I like the most. It's from A People's Tonight, which I think an American publication. And this particular account was written by a lady called Vicky Verma, and I've just edited it for time because she's got so much of the detail in there which was missing from some of the other accounts.
Right.
But it all starts with a gentleman called Joseph Simonton, who's a poultry farmer, is 60 years old at the time of the encounter, and he comes across a UFO. On April the 18th, 1961, Simonton was having breakfast in the late morning in his home when he heard a confusing noise near his farm. He looked out of his window and was stunned after seeing a silver disc hovering over his backyard. The UFO was about 4 metres high and 10 metres in diameter. That's quite big, isn't it? I mean, 10 metres, it doesn't sound like a lot.
Yeah.
But that's huge, because a car, I was thinking about this, a car is about 2.5, 3 metres long. Maybe a big one is 4 metres long. Yes, that's the size of a bus. It's really big. When he stepped outside, a hatch on the disc opened and 3 dark-skinned humanoid figures appeared. The aliens were about 5 feet tall, dressed up in tight clothes from head to toe. Right. The man said that one of the aliens had some vessel, like a bucket, and signalled for him to fill it with water. I don't know how he did that. He just pointed to a tap or something.
Also, it's like you've just travelled half the way across the universe and you've got a bucket. It's weird, that, isn't it?
It is really weird.
Okay.
But anyway, he takes the bucket, fills it with the water from the nearby pump, and returns it to the alien. He says the creatures looked nice, and they offered him 4 pancakes that had tiny holes. And they're cooking these pancakes. I just want to be absolutely clear.
They cooked them?
They are cooking them. So he doesn't...
They go into detail of this to get a little barbecue out.
They've got a flameless grill...
Right.
They've got a spatula, and just while he's getting the water, he peers in as an alien literally at a cooking station, making pancakes on this flameless grill. He's tossing them.
Available from JML and all good stores.
Do you know, the flameless grill from JML?
Flameless grill, it was perfect, isn't it? God, the lengths we go to put some product placement in this podcast is incredible.
I'm looking at you, JML, for those glasses you're advertising on the telly at the moment.
Yeah.
So
the pancake.
So he's making
hold
it.
on, no. I need to just get my head around this again.
Okay, so
the
picture
aliens
it.
arrive.
Yeah,
They land. They come out.
Well,
and
they're
say,
hovering. They're hovering.
Right. The hatch comes open. They come out saying, "Could you fill my bucket with water?"
He doesn't speak. He just intimates.
So he knows they've got a bucket, and he goes and fills it. While he's gone filling it, they get a flameless grill out and start making pancakes.
No. When he hands the water back, he peers inside.
Oh, and they're doing it inside. Right.
Yeah. So he says they've got a dashboard, but next to it, they've got a cooking station.
Right.
With this famously now flameless grill, and he's got pancakes on it
in all good stores,
and they're bubbling.
Wow!
And he offers him 4. He gives him 4, and after he takes them, they close the hatch and rise. He says that they started the ship. I don't know. Ding 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 ding. Brum, brum, brum. I don't know.
Zorg, have you turned the grill off? We're going.
And the craft slowly rises, and once it gets some distance from the ground, it flies away towards the south. And Simonton is left holding 4 pancakes, and he says his mouth and eyes are wide open. But it doesn't just stop there. Simonton tasted one of the pancakes, but he wasn't impressed at all by the friendly aliens cooking. He said it tasted like cardboard. And he was apparently he was really disappointed. One of the pancakes was given to a local judge by Simonton, who vouched for his honesty and reliability. Another pancake was received by Dr. J. Allen Hynek.
Oh, there was some tests. Oh, he's the Project Blue Book.
Project Blue Book, yeah.
So there's tests. There must be tests.
Well, I'll come on. And the third one...
Because it's making me think... Did they stop? Because he was a poultry farmer, right? You can't make a pancake without eggs. Well, not a human one.
Well, you see, the testing was done at the Food and Drug Administration by the Air Force, who had the third pancake. The pancakes were made by entirely earthly products. It was wheat, it was flour,
right? Eggs,
milk, and eggs. Yeah, they were just very poorly made pancakes.
What does that mean?
I don't know what it means, but I was incredibly disappointed. And I think what makes it even better, what makes the whole thing even better, and one of the reasons I chose this story, I guess we'll have to, maybe we'll charge putting it on social, I don't think you mind, but the illustration that they when she wrote this story, and it is the greatest alien food story I think I know.
Pancake-based story.
Could you just read that and draw it, please? and that's what the artist drew.
That is brilliant. Looks like it's not bad. It's not bad quality. It's a good painting, but the ship is.
It looks like a man in that the blue, what they call the blue men.
Yeah, or one of those kind of downhill
skiers.
Yes.
And he's handing over the FA Cup.
And he's got a swimming cap on his head.
He does, and there's no way that craft is 10 meters.
No,
according to the scale of the humans.
No,
there.
But okay, if we went with it, I've got this other feeling that maybe this is what aliens do when they kind of visit Earth. It's like when when you go on holiday and they say you've got to kind of embrace the local culture and eat the local food. Maybe they went, well, everybody down here eats pancakes. What do we need for that? We need some wheat, some eggs. We need, so it could be a true story. And this poor old farmer has gone, these are alien food. And it's all because they were being, eco-friendly tourists visiting Earth.
Well, nobody doubts his veracity. In fact, he was visited more than once by Project Blue Book. And there's a chap called Savino Borgo, who was an insurance agent and therefore was, relatively trusted because, his line of work. And he saw the flying saucer at the farm. Right. He testified that he did see it.
Wow.
So it wasn't one man's mad ramblings, but it's that disappointment. It reminds me it's similar to the fairy food in that
Yeah.
You know, it's not quite having the glamorization, but still.
Yeah, it's not what you were expecting.
No, when you're giving pancakes like that, you just go, they're going to be made of Saturn dust or...
Yeah. I like my theory, though. That would be the ultimate irony, wouldn't it? It was actually all happened as planned. It just meant that they were making food that the locals ate, and so it would come up, you know, testing as normal.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like,
although the flameless grill is bothering me.
I mean, I think he means a grill.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is 1960s, so I suppose a flameless grill might have been. I mean, it's obviously electric powered, but I think this whole.
It could have given them some eggs before they went, couldn't he? That's what I do.
Yeah.
Have some eggs. Go on, you've given me your pancakes. That's what you do, isn't it? You've given me some of your food, I'll give you some of mine.
There are older tales which aren't purported to be UFOs, but you remember when we were talking about like the airship flaps and such? And there is a story about an air balloon. It's an airship. It's an inflatable, clearly, that drops anchor over a village.
Yes, that's right. And then somebody comes down the anchor and starts suffocating.
That's right.
Yeah.
But they take some beer with them, so they don't leave. They don't leave any food. They take some beer.
Right.
So that is an interchange, sort of both ways.
Yeah.
And again, that is the same here with the aliens asking for the water.
Yeah.
Like, are we going to make a cup of tea with this? So it's different to the Sasquatch and like that earlier alien one where he's taken to the home world, where it's like simply, no, you can't have it because, or you should have it because of our nefarious means. This seems like, oh, thanks for the water, mate. Have some pancakes. See ya.
It's making it sound like these aliens are all on like RVing holidays, doesn't it? They're on camping trips to the Earth.
I mean, I just like the idea that he's just like, they've got one greedy friend with them. He's like, oh, I'm so cooking. My wife never allows me to make these pancakes. Like, Stan, your pancakes are terrible. Everyone says they're terrible. Like, give them to that human. I don't want them.
I like the idea as well, as if it is made up, that they've gone, how can we make these pancake weird? 6 holes in them. You know what I mean?
Well, so I think the reason he says they got little holes in them, because I'm imagining them to be, you know, like those little Scotch pancakes which have, but wait, because when you cook them, the batter, you get holes.
Bubbles.
Yeah, bubbles, yeah. I think it's like that. They sort of rising. And so I think he's trying to point out, if I read between the lines, that these things were made on the griddle. They're not sort of a factory thing, that. They're sort of fresh off the pan.
Unless Zorgo had eaten the blueberries before handing them over to him.
Well, that's the thing. You want blueberries, you want syrup, you want yogurt.
Yeah.
That's the sort of thing you want.
Yeah.
And like the fact that he ate it and nothing bad happened, and it was tested and nothing bad happened. My main disappointment is in modern days, you could pinpoint the origin of that flour. You'd be able to tell which part of the world it came from.
Yeah.
They obviously couldn't do that then, and that would have been brilliant if we'd have been able to test it
if it
and
come
gone
from a different continent or something.
Yes, and we don't import that flour. That would have been, because then we'd have got into, well, that sounds like breakaway civilization stuff. That sounds like the Aero Club myths around the flying, the airship flaps. Yeah. That sort of thing.
That's a great story, though.
It's just my favourite. Like, if I'm going to meet aliens, I don't want a probe up the Wahuna.
No.
I don't want to be taken away to witness horrible things, the stuff that we have encountered.
Yeah.
Alien hybrid reproduction stuff. But maybe a nice little picnic.
A couple of ropey pancakes that'd do for us.
I'd like a perhaps a pork. What do you call it? A pork pie.
Pork pie.
Yeah, and then they go, it's made with our own pigs. Yeah. And you're like, what, from Suffolk? No, from 20 billion light years away.
Yeah. And we'd go, it's nice. Not as good as a Sasquatch prawn cocktail, though.
No. I just thought this, because while I was tracking around with this, I found loads and loads. Pretty much all the stories are the same kind of thing. We covered the one where there was the man who, one piece of fairy, evidence was taken. We covered the guy who got the cup, and the cup went to the king, and all of that, and it's got lost.
And we did the one where he had a sandwich and stuck it in his pocket, and it was leaves.
It was leaves. They're all that. They're all that.
They're all that story.
But I found this one that was written by a traveller so it's from a traveller's blog in Thailand, written by an American who's got relations in Thailand. And this really sticks with me for what we've been talking about with the symbolism. It's very short. He just says, in my own personal experience with family members in Thailand in general, I've typically seen individuals leave rice or sticky rice, fruits, bananas, oranges, etc., alcoholic beverages at altars, but most specifically red Fanta. The use of red Fanta is a more contemporary and recent trend. The soft drink provides a humane substitute for antiquated forms of sacrifice and the ritual use of animal blood.
Because of the colour.
Yeah, and he says that's right. One of the most popular soft drinks in Thailand isn't consumed by the living, but left in spirit houses on altars for the dead.
It's fascinating.
And that idea of, because that is a sort of trans-dimensional interaction using food, but coming from a human perspective.
Yeah.
So trying to communicate with the gods, to look after the ancestors, you go, well, red Fanta is as good as blood. And that, I think, really ties back to the author's idea that it is more than just trickery. It is about a communication,
a connection,
and the food is the conversation, and I think that is the important thing there.
I keep thinking that if you're in the Fanta marketing department, we'll give you this one for free. Fanta, drink of the gods. Because you'd be all right, because you could say, well, it is because it's left out for the gods in Thailand.
Well, it is. Yes, yeah. Don't use blood. Don't go red Fanta. It's as good as blood.
No, the marketing department would never sign that off. But no, I think you're right. I think this symbolism of food in all cultures, really, isn't it? Like you say, I was thinking when you were talking about leaving the Fanta at the temples, and I've seen it when I was in Japan, people doing similar things. The harvest festival's a bit like that, isn't it? You know what I mean? It's that.
Oh, it's 100% that. Yeah,
it's all that. So you can see. I guess you can argue that two ways, can't you? You can argue it, this kind of premise that the author's gone for, that there is some kind of either spiritual or interdimensional connection, which is why this link exists. Or you could just say food is so important to us that it almost takes on a spiritual and religious significance. So maybe these experiences are an expression, a hallucination of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's one of those where if we think about it in the normal terms of, well, food is just food, then we'll never get to an answer.
Yeah.
If we start thinking of it as part of this language, this song and dance that we appear to be having with the paranormal, and all those elements that you were describing there fit into that, then we might have a better understanding of what it is. And of course, I think there are other things that you could be saying. I would imagine, because I was thinking this, it sort of fits outside the same story, but we did cover it a little bit when I spoke a couple of weeks ago. Because if you say you eat a magic mushroom and you get to speak with other deities, that mushroom itself is the communication.
Right.
A little bit like the ayahuasca there. The ayahuasca consumption is it's the first part of the communication. It knocks on the door. It's
the telephone. It's the Zoom link.
That's right.
It's the thing that allows the link to happen.
And maybe when you meet the fairies, rather than starting with the Zoom link, they're handing you their mobile phone to read a text message. That is taking the analogy way too far, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And of course, as soon as I start thinking about eating mushrooms, I don't know if you noticed on the way back from our lunch, they're playing Christmas adverts already in August. Yes, they're advertising Christmas food at the local restaurants. But I was reminded, of course, my favourite thing about mushrooms and the Santa myth is that perhaps people used to drink reindeer urine after they had they had eaten the mushrooms to enable them to fly, like the reindeers. And every time I think of mushrooms, I always think of flying reindeer. But anyway, I think if you do meet a fairy, don't eat the food. If you do meet an alien, maybe try the food. If you meet a Sasquatch, maybe you always have some snuff and some coffee, and some loo roll.
I'm with you on that summary, apart from I'm still struck with, if you meet a fairy, I would say don't eat the food or do eat the food, because either way you're screwed.
They'll attack you or maybe pinch you.
Yeah. That's fascinating. That was a rich vein of... It was a feast, Ben. That was a feast of a podcast. That was really interesting. I love that pancake story. That's going to stick with me, I think. Something a bit Jeff the Talking Mongoose about that.
I think when the paranormal gets ridiculous...
And funny, yeah.
Like you did Ridiculous Ghost, Jeff the Talking Mongoose.
Yeah.
I think sometimes whatever is causing this just gets frustrated and just decides to have a joke.
That's why you end up with Sam the Sandown Clown.
Sam the Sandown Clown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Wow, that was really, really good. Once again, now I've written my Tulpa project music. We've got nothing this week because we're recording on the same day as I was talking about it earlier.
Well, let's play it under us reminding people where they can go.
Okay. Yes. All right. So cue the music. If you want to go and check us out and become a Quantum Mechanics Patreon, go to patreon.com/TQM pod, where we continue to put episodes up there a little bit early, and we give little details of what we're working on and various other bits. Get the artwork a bit early so you can have a look and guess. I've started doing that. Have you noticed that, Ben? I put the artwork up on Patreon a little bit early, but don't put a description, because it's like, I wonder if people are guessing what the episode's going to be about. So anyway, check us out on Patreon. We'd love it if you did, and we really appreciate those who've already joined. Patreon.com/TQM pod.
Lovely job. And if you've ever been offered food by anybody or any strange entity, I'd love to know. And of course we're still indebted to Ruth Roper Wild for the trans-dimensional sausage.
We'll never forget the trans-dimensional sausage
and the ghost sandwich. So food in all its forms. Maybe you have seen a phantom cornetto, and if you have, let us know if you licked it.
I just went all Homer Simpson then. Cornetto.
I know, the chocolate ones are the best.
I love the mint ones. Anyway, we'll be back next week with more quantum mechanics weirdness. We'll see you then.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Are you the quantum mechanics?